Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today we're gonna move on in the trailer and do a few more clips, but before we start, just kind of the usual disclaimer. I am totally just a fan. I enjoy looking for the lore, the theories, the details. I think Hideo is a master of misleading us, but also giving us a lot of evidence for just things that you just normally don't catch because he keeps his trailers in so much shadow. But if someone maybe giving a different perspective than what you feel is correct, or maybe arguing points that you aren't comfortable with, things such as Higgs being the villain, or arguing differences in timelines, things like that. If you're not into that, feel free to click away. This is mostly just my opinions and what I think could be happening in scenes based on details that we're seeing and lore that we know from the other games. I'm a big fan of protecting the peace, and this is a small channel where normally I post art that I draw, so I do use the block button if people get too aggressive in the comments, but so far, other than a couple people, you guys have been great, so I really hope that you guys enjoy this video. And here are a few on the screen that I have already done. So if you're new to the channel and you're just now finding me, there are some videos that you can watch if you'd like to. There's a 3-hour science video about string theory and physics that's holding up pretty well, and 2 trailer breakdowns so far. With that out of the way, let's get started. So, the bunker is a bit confusing to me. It seems like these stairs that she is now on are the same stairs that the person would have went down in order to get to her. But if that's the case, they would have to be kind of stupid to not just go back up the stairs, just turn around. So maybe that gives some credence to this is a robot or a BT and not a human. Because if she goes up the cargo hold, it takes like 30 seconds for her to get up there, and they're coming down the stairs. So if they just turned around and walked back up the stairs, we would already be seeing them on the stairs. So I'm kind of curious if there is a different stairwell or opening that I'm just not aware of, because the way that it's looking right now, like, I can't figure out the logistics of. But other than that, there's not a lot in this scene to look at. I did check out what the floor said and like the exit sign, and there was nothing of interest, no weird stuff. It just says watch your step. One of the things on the wall says insulated, and of course there's an exit sign, and one of them says like caution, door will close. So right there where she's at is actually like a caution stairwell. So I'm assuming it's kind of like in all bunkers where they can close that door and lock people out, which they must be very safe, because why didn't they just have the bunker door closed in the first place? Unless the electricity that we saw is them kind of like shutting down the grid so that the door would maybe automatically open in case of emergency. I'm not sure. I've went ahead and lightened up the scene so that we can see it a little bit better. I'm still just so impressed with the amount of modeling they were able to get into this motion capturing process. If it's been a little bit, this is the exact same yellow harness that Sam is wearing earlier in trailers where he's carrying Lou around. And obviously the biggest elephant in the room is the fact that she's no longer aged. And I personally think that has to do with kind of the reversal of the time fall, and the fact that for a while there they can actually be in the rain at the end of Death Stranding 1. So probably her body has been able to fight off the effects, or perhaps they have a new medicine, which we see later on they inject tomorrow with something in order to kind of wake her up from the stasis that she's in. So perhaps they've just advanced medicine a little bit more. Personally, this is something that felt very off to me when I first watched the trailer. She is very moisturized, which seems like a weird thing, but like she is either sweating or very warm, which I know you can get a cold sweat when you're nervous, but something else I noticed is that her eyes were very moist, and so it just made me think this is probably um, like a BT, or there's high like beryllium in the air, because this just seems almost like an allergic reaction. So while I do think like maybe the sheen is just to like add to the drama, it seems odd that she does seem to have tears. You can see it better in the previous clip where she was in the blue light, but this is the same Fragile that stood up to Higgs in pretty much her underwear and was fine. She didn't cry or anything. So I don't think it's necessarily that she's in a stressful situation and that's making her cry. She doesn't strike me as that kind of character. So I'm thinking that we're having a reaction to increased beryllium in the air. Initially, when I saw the handprint on the building, it's so quick you hardly see it. But of course, when I was looking for clues and I saw this, my first thought was, okay, BTs must still exist. But it didn't really make sense with kind of what we've seen and how no one's really wearing like time fog gear exactly, and like they don't seem that worried about going outside. And it's previously rained. You can see water on the ground. So either timefall does still exist and BTs are still a thing and we still have to worry about catchers and the handprints, or this is something similar to what Sam was doing with Lou, where they were making handprints on the wall, and possibly he just had some ink left over and so he stuck it on his house. I don't really know, but I didn't know that maybe if a lot of people caught that there was still a handprint out here, so I just wanted to show you guys that just in case. This is probably the only part of the trailer that I'm frustrated with Hideo about. He made it to where you could not see the text on the wheel. When you can see it clearly, or could have seen it clearly, he puts a like lens flash basically onto the video, and it's all whited out, and it makes me so frustrated because later in another trailer we see a vehicle with Fragile's face on it, and it says like Fragile Drawbridge Vehicular, and I think this is going to be one of Fragile's inventions, or rather part of her company, because I'm pretty convinced that Drawbridge is Fragile's and the Magellan is kind of an additional thing, or maybe something that comes after they get a private investor. I'm not sure how much of what Fragile is doing with the vehicles is connected to Drawbridge or if it's a separate thing, but when we get there, there's a really funny she has like a really goofy logo of herself. She looks like a cartoon. She has little ghosts coming out of her cigarette, and it's just really goofy, and I can only find one tiny clip of it. And anyway, long story short, I think that blue that you can't really see on the tire is going to end up being like Fragile Express something vehicles. So I think that's why it's covered up, because it would have been too big of a spoiler at the time. And I also want to say that the color scheme, the rings are black and blue, the bike is black and blue, so just putting that out there. I feel like there's a lot going on here. There is this cave that they appear to kind of be like bunkered away in. They have a bunker, but then it's inside of like this cavern, which I'm super curious where we are. Is this still in the UCA? Is this outside of the UCA? I can't really tell. All these clips have a hint of a rainbow in them, which I feel like is kind of foreshadowing the timefall returning, or possibly has already returned since she does have the tears. Two things I really can't understand because I just can't get zoomed in enough. There is like this orange light in the cave, and it makes me wonder, does it go farther back? Does that go through the cave and maybe we come out on the other side? And on the far right in the smaller box, that almost looks like a man-made structure to me, but it could just be more of the rocks. It's kind of hard to tell. We then have these guys who are super neat. Let's break down their outfit a little bit. First though, Coral, gorgeous. Hope this is part of the beach and that we actually get to take pictures of this and look at this, because wow, the ecology of this, perfect, spot on. What we're looking at that really interests me is the fact that this is like, a lot of people consider this to be a BB pod on their back, and that's what I think the most familiar imagery is. I don't think that. If it is a BB pod, I think it's purely because you would need something similar to a BB being in both worlds to be able to teleport back and forth and properly maybe use the seam, a lot like how Higgs had the baby doll. To me, it's giving, well, first of all, miniature coffin. It reminds me of what Higgs was carried in. The other thing is that it reminds me of like an air tank, like air filtration. We know that there's a lot of beryllium in the air whenever we're in Death Stranding 1, and normal people who do not have dooms are unable to be outside without, like, basically like air masks and such. And the reason that dooms people can, other than the fact that you want to see their face in a video game like this, is because they have an allergy, and basically when they get like beryllium in their system, they just cry it out, and that's the reason that they're always crying. So if it's similar to what I'm thinking and it's like an air filtration device, that would assume that something about this other air, like maybe our air, is not good for the beach thing. So perhaps there is like a BT or something similar. I've also thought, what if there's like an octopus in there? You know, like that is so random, but like we've seen so many octopuses in like, or octopi in the trailer, that it would not even faze me if they cracked one of these puppies open and there was just like an octopi in there, and it's just like, okay, like instead of a BB. Just so weird. But anyway, beyond the point, that's all speculation. Looks like a coffin, looks like an air filter, also could be similar to a BB pod that we've already seen. The logo on the back is the part that confuses me. I've not seen anything similar to that logo so far. Another thing is that they walk through what appears to be glass almost, and I love that. So this is a reflection of them walking up to this wall. So I was super curious if we would at any point in the game be approaching barriers that we didn't realize were barriers until we noticed ourselves in the reflection, and then maybe we're able to walk through those, almost like a Mario game. If you ever played Paper Mario, there's a lot of hidden walls that you can walk through, but you wouldn't know unless you turn a certain way. There appears to be like maybe a Titan BT in the background. It almost looks like it has the fingers on its head, but it's pretty hard to see. But you can see that red pulsing, I call it a heart, but honestly it's closer to like what a sack would look like a sack of flesh. It's pretty gross, but you've seen it in the trailer so far, and it seems to be like carrying like liquid BTs inside. And so I'm just kind of curious. That's in the background, which is either going to be behind them if the entire world is a reflection when you walk up to these walls, or possibly only like certain parts of the wall are a reflection, and that is actually in front of them. It's kind of hard to tell at this point what's going on. I was surprised that there was a lack of corpses, to be honest. There's no dead whales, there's no crabs, nothing like that. And so I'm curious if we're on the beach or in the seam. I assume we're on the beach, which the beach in the game is considered where you go after you die. So you would go to the seam where Sam normally is, and then walk into the water and move on to your personal beach where you would, I guess, live forever. Or I don't know, something happens. And so I'm not sure where this is. I guess it has to be the beach though. It looks a lot nicer and a lot more complex than the seam. So let's take a closer look at the fronts of their outfits while we have some nice HD clips to look at, because the other ones that we viewed were kind of far back from the camera. So they really do appear to have like structure to their ponchos and stuff. I think that might play a part beyond just function, like it looking nice. So these are definitely robots. You can tell they have ball joints. At first I wasn't as clear on that, but you can tell in the back one, ball joints. They have the black omele mask, not the red one, and they appear to have kind of like layered clothing. I do wonder if these cloaks will come off at some point and we'll get to see them kind of just in their regular bodies, or if this is just to let us as the viewer know that these are kind of like the apostles of Higgs, or the ones that follow him the closest, because the ones with the cloaks are the ones we're seeing with the coffin, with him in the factory. Something else I just want to touch on is that Higgs wore a lot of fake quipus in Death Stranding 1. He had like 3 additional just straying quipus that he made himself, and they were on him in various places, like his hip and under like his chest armor. And then of course he had Amelie's quipu, and it's kind of similar to what we're seeing on the bottom of their jackets, so I just wonder lore wise if that will be important at all. The other thing that I think is important is to say why I put this scene here in the middle of the fight. I'm assuming that these guys basically teleport from this spot on to where Fragile is. Like they're being called or summoned, whether to hurt or to help. I haven't made up my mind yet. But I would like to note that these guys do not have anything on their stomach. There's no pod, there's no glowing light. So in case you hadn't been able to tell that before, there's definitely no like pods anywhere like what Higgs has. So just noting that. So in the background in the trailer, you can actually tell what I thought was a truck is actually some like disturbance of the air. So I do think people are like teleporting in, or as we saw the occultists do in the red outfits, they might be like breaking through the seam, sort of like how Higgs used to teleport. We also can kind of look at this part, and they throw something that looks like it explodes. So I thought maybe mules, and they have those electrical things, but this looks more like a bullet hitting metal or something along those lines. Here I've slowed down her actually getting shot. You actually can't see a bullet or anything like that, so we don't really know what kind of projectile they've thrown at her. But I just think it's really impressive the amount of like realism they've been able to get here. It's just really neat. Personally, I think this is where it gets really interesting. This is kind of the first time I felt like I wanted to go back and look at the trailers. And here's what I've noticed. Lou's toes, if you look down by her feet, that looks to me like the I think it's just called Carillium, but basically like the Chiral Matter that you pick up that's in the shape of hands, that's gold. It looks like it's coming off of them as they slide across the ground. This confirms for me that Fragile has already began being a part of Drawbridge, or is in the like beginnings of it, because that's her Drawbridge outfit, and a lot of people were arguing that it couldn't be Fragile, blah blah blah. That is the jacket tied around her waist, so it makes sense now why the jacket was tied, because if they had it pulled up then we would know. But it also brings into question some of the timeline, like did she meet, I still think this is before the Magellan, simply because Sam doesn't have white hair. She, Lou is alive, obviously. But it does bring some questions around, like, why does she have this outfit on? When did she get the outfit? If that's not a Magellan outfit, then when did she don that? Because she has the black jacket on the Fragile Drawbridge icon on the truck, but she doesn't have second hands yet, which I assume she's going to get when she gets injured. So just letting you guys know, she is in that outfit when she gets shot. I would just like to say Mother of the Year award, because my goodness, my girl did not let go of that baby's head. She was holding on for dear life through that whole rough and tumble. Man, good for her. Now, when we're looking at Lou, she is crying. Obviously, this was a traumatic experience. But every time that Lou met Higgs in the first game, she was also sobbing her heart out. I mean, just immediately crying in the pod. So, while I would love for this to be a scene where Higgs is actually saving them and we're being misled, which I think it is, but I don't know that he's saving them for a good reason. Um, I am interested in if she is crying because she recognizes him or simply because of the trauma. Do I think she can recognize him? Probably not in the regular sense, especially because his entire outfit has changed, but it would be kind of interesting for the narrative if she can like still sense energies of like kind of like evil or BTs. So I hope we get some more clarification on what Lou can and can't do now that she's out of the pod. Personally, I can't look at this picture without laughing because somebody had posted a meme that was like, wide Higgs can't hurt you. And he is just, yeah, impossibly wide with those shoulder blades. He's just cracking me up. But if we look at this kind of analytically, at first I couldn't really tell what his legs were doing. They looked really weird. And then I realized he has the leg skeleton on. And so that, I mean, if the stomach didn't clarify who this was for us, there's no doubt it has his golden band on his wrist. It has the skeleton that you can get in the game, his red one that we've seen in the trailer. He appears to be mid-stride, so I really think that we can say that he has lost his powers, at least in the way that he can no longer float and fly and all of that stuff. So I personally think maybe he has the leg skeleton, because if you've been working for Amelie for several years and you can fly, like, don't tell me you'd be walking. I think he's probably just doesn't have leg muscles really, and he needs like the additional help to get around, because yeah, he gestures a lot in the first game and he uses his arms quite a bit, but I hardly ever see him walk in that. I don't think he walks at all in that game except for the boss fight, basically. So I'm thinking maybe he just has really weak legs now.
I tried to jump us out of there, but I could only take my equipment with me, and I couldn't possibly think of Lou like that.
First of all, I love her. She's an angel. If anything happens to her, I'm gonna burn my copy of the game. Like, Fragile is an angel and Lou is a precious babe. But looking at this, I am just so curious. When she looks and she sees him, she tries to instantly jump, but she doesn't look scared. She doesn't look as scared as I think that she should look. If she sees someone that she knows is coming to kill them and is powerful and has hurt her very badly before, she just doesn't seem convincing to me. We see a lot of these sparkles throughout the trailer, but we see them most recognizably whenever Higgs is shown in his cast card and he's kind of like doing that crazy grin and he's like smiling at the camera. And we see a bunch of these in different colors, red, blue, and white, I believe. Now, in this trailer, she says, I couldn't take Lou with me because I could only take my equipment. I couldn't think of Lou that way. This is a beautiful callback to Death Stranding 1, whenever Fragile's actually able to take Lou in the pod to Amelie's beach, and she tells Sam, hey, I was able to bring the little one with me because I just thought of her as another tool in my bag. And she basically says babysitting sucks, which is so funny that, they open up this trailer with her babysitting, and then not only is she babysitting, but Lou has become so integral to her unit, her connections, that she can't even like jump her out to save her life. And then she is directly looking at Higgs, who we know is Higgs, and we can see behind her there's a shadow of what looks to me to be those 3 occultist looking like followers who we can only assume are the ones that shot her. So either we're being misled and Higgs is being contracted to kill her by someone else, and this is a ruse, and he points the gun and doesn't shoot because he doesn't want to actually kill them. He just wants to scare them and or pretend like he's finishing a contract for whoever, or, which is probably the more likely scenario, which is sad, he is still Crazy Higgs and is wanting Lou for some reason. Either he wants her dead because he wants the beach to be restarted, or he knows that killing her will help him to get some means to an end, or this is just one more way that he is kind of taking out anger on Fragile. But the story arcs and the plots that we've seen so far don't really support that, so I'm still not sure why he would be doing this, but it's pretty evident that it is him. There's no really getting around that at this point. I still think she just doesn't seem very scared or resigned or anything. Like her face is so neutral, and so we don't get a lot of hints from what she's thinking. When you darken the footage, you can tell that there are 3 figures back there, so I do think they're the occultists. They look like they have the big red jackets on, so I think we can assume that's who's shot her originally. I want you to pay attention to how she looks. She's looking straight forward, and then all of a sudden the shadow appears. I think that he is still teleporting and or using the beach to slide quickly to someone, and I say that because if you watch the trailer, he had to be booking it. Like, boy had to be running to get from where he was to where she is, and I just don't think he was sprinting. So I think he used that beach technique of sliding through like the mirror to get to her that quickly.
There was no way for the 2 of us.
This gun, gorgeous. The modeling, gorgeous. Being able to see his face for the first time with the filters on, really cool. The gun has actually changed quite a bit. So this clip is from the original trailer we got with Higgs and the gun. And the next clip after Fragile, I'll show you again, is the next time we get the gun's model. Totally different. It has emblems on it, and that was just really neat to see how far they had come. So at this point, they still hadn't even modeled the gun, but we can tell that it's based on basically like a Glock. It has its iron sights. It's really actually nice, and whenever it does the animation for the gun, it actually does pull back and basically like hammer. I want to talk about Higgs and gun safety for a minute. So I thought it was interesting that he had iron sights on this, when I don't know why he couldn't have just scoped it out or put a sight on it or an optic or whatever. And so it made me think about in Death Stranding 1, he actually, appears to be a poor shot, because whenever he is shooting at Sam, he just like sprays and prays with his AR. More power to him though, because his hands were full with ambyes on his shoulder. And so a lot of people were like, oh, he's not very good. But then when you think about it, and he had the AR rifle, he then takes it, aims with one hand, doesn't even use the scope, and, hits the pod with BB in it directly. So I am curious if they are going to make him a better marksman in this, or if he's always been a good marksman and he was just doing what Amelie wanted, and so he couldn't be as good of a marksman. But there is a point in Death Stranding 1 where there is a homo demon, and he's holding the rifle like such a goofy dude whenever he is like attacking Fragile and she's having to walk out in the timefall, and it was all I could look at. He was like holding it sideways like it was a Glock, and he was, in movies when they hold their 9, they'll hold it sideways to show that they're like really cool or whatever. He was like holding his rifle sideways, and so for the longest time I thought, well, maybe Higgs taught them to shoot and he wasn't a very good shot. But I think if he's using irons, of course this is kind of like a gun over meat shot, like he shouldn't miss at this range. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting. He has irons only on his pistol. With the mask. I just want to put that out there. With the mask that he technically shouldn't be able to see through. So how is he seeing?
To escape together. The best I could hope for was to jump Lou out. Just Lou.
Now, Lou hasn't been shot yet. She's not. I mean, she was probably injured in that crash, but there shouldn't be any reason for her to be bleeding tar from her eyes. Bleeding tar is typically what we see when Sam is, coming out of the seam or whenever people are in pain. However, we see Amelie cry tar, we see Higgs cry tar when they are calling upon their powers from the beach. So this is the first real clip in the trailer that we see Lou um, doing something that seems out of the ordinary. Obviously, she's done things before, but I feel like this is the clip that told me, okay, something's happening. And a lot of people think that this is Higgs is doing, Tomorrow's doing, someone on the beach, any of those things. I'm really curious too, because whenever Higgs was bleeding tar, it was always when he was extremely like overstimulated, like he was using so much of the beach's power, like it was making him have to excrete that extra chiralium somehow, is how I took it. So he was crying tar rather than crying tears. It's also the first time that I've seen Fragile look concerned during this whole thing. I mean, she's looked a little odd at times, but she looks at Lou and she just kind of has this expression of oh gosh, because I'm not sure if she's ever seen the Tara crying. In Death Stranding 1, I can't remember if she was a part of any of that, or maybe would be aware of it, and what it means. But obviously that would be terrifying to see. And if she's ever seen any of the clips of Sam's battle for some reason, she would recognize that as not a good thing. So I do think it's interesting to note that I think this is probably the first time that Lou has ever done this, and it's probably the first time obviously that Fragile is witnessing that, if it's not the first time Lou has done this, period. It's hard to tell. There might have been lines prior to this, but I think this is the first time the lines pop up. It's as close as I could get to where they pop up, and it happens when Fragile and Lou touch foreheads. I've said this before, but when Mama and Lochna touched foreheads, the beach kind of seemed to connect around them. Things floated. We see that just about every time that we, sync up a Cupid, the beach seems to take away gravity and things seems to float. We see it in the trailer with Higgs and Tomorrow when their foreheads touch. They literally kind of almost transport to the seam. Things turn really weird. And she also has a much longer tar tear. So I'm not sure what I want to put here as my final thoughts, but I don't think that Fragile is the one jumping them. When they end up in this fiery place in a second, I think it could just be that Lou has accidentally triggered something, because it reminds me of Cliff's battlefield, of where we see Neil at, and both of those people are probably gonna, I don't know if Neil does, I can't remember, but Cliff definitely has the tar tears when this happens, and it just makes me think, does this get triggered, and is Lou on a beach that's formed from trauma, as we found out that Cliff's beach was a joint beach full of, soldiers who had gone through similar traumatic events. It would be interesting if Lou ends up on a beach with other children, other babies, other people who've been hurt in this way. So it would be odd if we find out that there's a beach. Tomorrow obviously has grown up somewhere. She has memories and things. It would be interesting if we find out that there is a beach mirrored version of the world that we're seeing. And so perhaps Lou doesn't get lost in the beach or the seam, but teleports them someplace similar but not good. I wanted to give you a better clip. This is a few frames forward where you can really see the lines, and just to be clear, they are only attached to Lou. The strings are not attached to Fragile in any way, so whatever's happening is directly involved with Lou, and the only other people that we really see strings attached to, other than the robots hanging from the sky, are Higgs and Tomorrow. Something of a special interest for me ever since I learned to shoot guns myself, and I have a Glock, and actually I have several, but this reminds me a lot of the Glock 48. It reminds me a lot of it appears to have like a slide where you maybe could put a scope on, but it's hard to tell because like the Glock 48 MOS, you can actually add an optic to the slide, but I can't really get a good look at it, so I'm not totally sure. What I do like about it is that you can actually see the green iron sights, which I find kind of funny. That's just such a good little detail. So if you're unfamiliar, green iron sights are best for human eyes, which obviously the only people shooting them should be humans, but it's considered the brightest color to the human eye and therefore the easiest optic to see whenever you are in bright daytime conditions. Meaning, I think that Higgs is not only human, but like very human, as in he's needing these additional benefits in order to best use his weapons. And so the fact that they made it a green iron sight instead of a red, which would match the rest of his gear, I feel like that's just such a minute detail, and that's just amazing. I hope that it actually means something. Now, if you yourself know about optics, you'll know that red optics are best in low light situations, which is why like they're pretty popular among general gun owners, which tells me that perhaps Higgs is mostly in a daytime setting, therefore it is good for his iron sights to have the green on them. What it made me consider is perhaps he is utilizing this pistol on the beach quite a bit, because as we've seen, it is very sunny, there's a lot of sand, and so it would make sense that he would need something that he could easily see in such a bright atmosphere. I was pretty disappointed when I saw that the Revan brand, which is just the game's sort of like in-game brand of gun, is actually what was on this pistol, because initially I thought it was the hieroglyphs from his bunker, the King Tutankhamun. I thought it was his coffin hieroglyphics that Higgs is so fond of, so it was kind of a letdown to see that it was just Revan the gun makers, but at the same time, I guess that gives us a little more lore into the game. Revan is supplying these occultists or new homo demons, or ghost mech is what they're being called in the trailer and at the convention. So it seems like Revan is supporting these people. Unfortunately, at this time, I cannot remember the other in-game gun brand, but it'll be curious to see whose guns they're making. Are they making drawbridge guns? Are they making APAC guns? Are they making some sort of other mech? And has Revan any idea that they are supporting a terrorist at the moment? The graphics are gorgeous of the gun going off, showing actual gunpowder. You can get a clear look at the gun here. What cracks me up is we definitely have like the 5 pounds of pressure he has to actually hold his finger down when he pulls the trigger, which was just awesome gun mechanics. And what really cracks me up is, why does this man just not practice good gun shooting? Like, he uses one hand, and you can see as it kicks up a couple inches that there's recoil on the gun. So it's funny. You can actually see on the back of the gun that there were green marks back there too. So he has a full green iron sight set. But it was just funny. I don't understand why he refuses to use 2 hands on a weapon. It's like, you have 2 hands, use them. But I also think they're not even standing there. It really feels like he waits so long to pull the trigger that they're probably, what we'll find out in game, because obviously Fragile's alive, is he probably just shot the air where they were, because I don't think he has any intention of actually killing either of them, partly because I'm not sure that the beach is even working and that you can die. I'm quite curious if the reason that we see the tar on Fragile's face will be because there's some sort of strange beach thing going on, and so you can't properly die, and maybe Fragile knows that, and so she's not scared and not surprised at what's happening. Who knows? But I also think it could just be that, first of all, I don't think Hideo is going to show a baby being murdered in game. I can't imagine. That seems so out of pocket and not acceptable to Western media that I don't think they could get away with that. Secondly, I just don't see what it would do for him to shoot them in game. I don't think it would further the plot at all. So while I do think he's the reason this happened, I don't think he shoots them. But I do think that Lou might unfortunately die just from the crash. So I'm really curious what actually happens at this point. Unfortunately, we don't know that yet. We do know that she goes into a nightmare mode, but we are at 40 minutes, and this is where I'm going to pause today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that I wasn't too goofy in the video, but I'm getting more comfortable as we go through them, and I can't wait to break down the next few scenes in the trailer and talk about some of the things that I saw and what they might be. I hope you have a good day, and if you liked the video, leave a comment. If you didn't like the video, you can leave a comment, but be nice, please. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!